Good day, and on behalf of the Mayor's Office of Black Male Engagement, we invite you and welcome you to another Spotlight series where we highlight the contributions of melanin-enriched men in the city of Philadelphia. And today we're very excited to have a guest, Mr. Akinseye Brown, who is from ECBOC, who is going to tell us about his organization, tell us about who he is, what he does here in the city, and how what he does impacts men and boys of color in the city. So once again, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. So
Yes, sir.
if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about who you are, aside from the work that you do, give us some insight in terms
Yes,
of
sir.
who Akinseye is.
Yes, so my name is Akinseye Brown. I am born in Philadelphia, born and raised. I was raised primarily in the Mount Airy and Germantown area of the city. And I was going to school, or I went to school at John B. Kelly as elementary school. And then obviously I went on to high school. But before high school, I went to Pickett,
Okay.
Clarence E. Pickett.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to remember all these schools here. I kind of bounced around a little bit. So I went to John B. Kelly for elementary school.
Okay.
I went to Clarence E. Pickett and then moved to Morris E. Leeds. And that's what brought me to the Mount Airy section of the city.
Yeah.
And then from the Leeds school, I went to Creative and Performing Arts.
Okay.
And being raised in a artistic family, I was able to use those innate skills that my parent gave me to enter into Creative and Performing Arts as a visual arts major.
Yeah.
And that was in 1987.
Got it.
So I think that was one of my biggest hallmarks for myself as a creative person, going to Creative and Performing Arts, because what that taught me was that life wasn't easy and people are not giving you things on a silver platter.
Got it.
To enter into Creative Performing Arts, you have to go through a portfolio process. And that was the first time I ever went through something like that.
Wow.
When you're going through middle school and grade school, you just kind of going because your parents send you to school.
Right.
But this is the first time that I wanted something and I had to work at getting it with competition.
Got it.
You know what I mean? And
Got
I think that really stuck into my mind as a young person.
Yeah.
And that followed me as I went into my professional life as a creator, a artist, illustrator, graphic designer, and eventually a comic book artist.
Got it. Got it. So as a melanin-enriched man of African descent,
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about your time at Kappa, where there are a lot of folks who were like you and seeking their dreams and learning about the arts and the impact of arts in the city.
Absolutely. I think Kappa gave me a incredible foundation for understanding and appreciating the arts, but also artists. The people behind the paintbrush, the people behind the pens and the pencils and things, the people behind the voice and the instruments. What I learned in Kappa is that there's one thing to have talent, whether or not that's something that you grew up with or you really worked at it. But there's another thing that speaks to your work ethics and keeping that talent and then pushing it forward. Because as you already know, as an educator yourself, you can't allow yourself ever to have that status quo. You always have to push for the next level. And at Kappa, between students, sometimes there were competition. Sometimes I can draw the still life better than you, or no, you can't. Or look at the lighting on that. You get a little bit of that.
Gotcha.
But just the fact that you had professors and teachers that were grading your progress. Your artistic, creative progress. Sometimes you, as a student, think that my creative process is something private. Something. I'm an artist, so it's my private voice. But there's things that you could do to improve with that.
Got it.
So that was another eye-opening experience for me as well. That though you can have these internal feelings and thoughts and visions and ideas, there's still things that you can learn.
Got it. Could you
Yes.
speak to the power of the arts
Absolutely.
as it relates to melanin-enriched people? And I say melanin-enriched because I'm talking about folks who have melanin in their melanocytes. From mahogany to chestnut.
Absolutely.
Folks call themselves different things. So
Absolutely.
this is a way to kind of unify us all. So that's what I mean when I say that.
Oh,
But
no, that's
as it relates to people of color, especially men of color in the city of Philadelphia, is the arts important, and talk about, just sort of where the role of the arts in
Yeah, I think the arts is very important. I think the arts has a lot to teach African men. It's within the arts that we begin to learn our culture, and we can begin a road or journey towards our identity as African men.
Got it.
Because if you look at African art in a museum, you may look at it and say, well, I have no connection to that because I grew up, again, in Mount Airy. I don't know what these symbols mean. I don't know what this chiseled line mean. I don't know what these colors represent, right? But when you begin to study and you begin to take an in-depth look at the symbology behind the art, the meaning behind the art, why was the art created, what time periods it was created, and in what conditions,
Wow.
you begin to understand a little bit more about your connection to a people and culture that you may not see in the everyday. And then what that begins to do is take you on a journey of rediscovery, and then on another journey of how you want to develop yourself into the future.
That's very powerful. So tell us about ECBOC, and tell us what this
Yeah.
acronym is. Folks want to know what ECBOC is. I hear.
How do you
being
even
bounced
spell
around.
it? No.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Right. So ECBOC, the East Coast Black Age of Comics Convention, is a 501c organization in Philadelphia. It's one of the longest running, if not the longest running, Black-owned comic book convention in the nation.
Wow.
So it's headed by our founder, Mr. Yumi Odom, an educator from Philadelphia. He'll say born and raised from Brooklyn, so
Right.
I have to say that.
Universe.
So that you know Mr.
Exactly.
Yumi well.
Right.
Right. But the foundations of ECBOC obviously came from Mr. Yumi's love and enthusiasm about fantasy and sci-fi and even science.
Right.
But underneath all that, it has a underlining focus on literacy. So the interest with ECBOC is to bring young people to a community environment where they can open up their hearts and minds to all different types of ideas of what they can be and what could be, but at the same time, give them a foundation of literacy, of the importance of history, and the importance of culture.
Got it.
And so that's what we do at ECBOC, and that's what we'll be doing this coming ECBOC, May 2019. It'll be our 18th year.
Okay. Is this a convention?
Yes, it's a comic book convention. For
2019?
those who don't know necessarily about comic book conventions, they're just a geek party. Well, people converge together and they talk about comic books. They talk about the literature within the story of comic book heroes.
Got it.
And many of them are creators, and many others are simply fans who want to read and purchase.
Right.
And so what also happens within that Xbox circle environment is a lesson about entrepreneurialism.
Got it.
And so what we have there is when we have our large marketplace that features at least 30 to 40 different vendors and exhibitors, you can have a professional that actually has worked for some larger publication houses in New York or California or wherever they might be.
Yeah.
But then we also have, the Raheems and the Shaniquas and things like that from Philadelphia,
Right.
who says that, you know what, I have an idea for a story. I have an idea of an African hero that looks like me,
Right.
that has Afro puffs or braids or locks. I'm going to create it, and not only am I going to create it, I'm going to market it to the public.
Wow.
I'm not going to keep it in my bedroom. I'm not going to post it on my wall or hide it under my bed.
Right.
I'm going to come to the front, come to the fore, and come to the public and say, hey, look, my name is Jamal,
Right.
and I have a publication. My book is called The Essence of Every Black Young Man,
Got
or
it.
Super Jamal.
Yeah. Seeing yourself as superheroes
Yes.
is very important. So before we close, you talked about the impact already, but I'd like to know two more questions.
Yes, sir.
First, is there a particular character that kind of is very popular at these conventions where folks might dress up like, and tell us a little bit about that character?
Yeah. Our mascot character is a Petamax created by Mr. Yumi Odom.
Okay.
And he is a young boy by the name of Assad, and he has twisty knots and things like that. But he's also partly immortal. So what that story allows him to see various things throughout our history. but then also go into the future
Mm.
and see where we can or could be.
Got it.
But there's plenty of other characters that exist. For instance, we've had our brother Dawood Amyabwible, who is a Philadelphia native, who created the character Brother Man. He was very popular in the 90s. And he was credited as one of the earliest black comic book heroes from the city that went nationwide. But Philadelphia is also a city of firsts. Our city is actually the home of George and Orrin Evans, I believe from the North Philly area. And in 1946, I believe, they created the country's first black comic book called All Negro Comics.
Wow.
So our city is very rich in ideas, very rich in stories, and Ekbach, and as well as myself, are very keen on keeping that tradition of storytelling alive, especially with our black boys. Uplifting literacy, but also telling our stories, because that's where we'll see ourselves in the future. That's where we get our identity.
That's a perfect segue into the last question. And just wanted to know if you could give us a piece of advice for the listening audience and for the watching audience. You know, melanin-rich boys and men in this city, what advice would you give them?
My advice would be to know your story. You know, don't be afraid of your own voice. Get to know your family, because within your family, you automatically begin to know a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely.
You know, whether you get along with your aunts or uncles or your father or mother or what have you, there's something of you within them. You know, it's your job to carry their story forward and then to make it your own.
Got it.
That's our job.
That's powerful. Well, we'd like to thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely.
And your commitment to the people and the work.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you so much for that.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll return with another edition of the Spotlight series on behalf of the Office of Black Male Engagement in the city. Thank you very much for watching, and tune in next time. I don't know how to bring proper closure to that. You know.